Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-host, Keith Bogan.
Greetings from Denver.
Doug Hemmerdyke.
Morning.
And back from Arizona, Chad Holloway.
Good morning from Atlanta.
Today, we're going to be talking about, it may seem like we're in a little bit of a rut because we've been in the doom and gloom sector of life, but it's because these things keep happening. We'll get into the keep happening part of this. We'll be discussing the school shootings in Oxford, Michigan, and the now new development of the fact that the young man's parents have been arrested with involvement in the school shooting. I mean, we'll do a little bit of a start with first. Let's start with this didn't really come into light until Columbine in 1998. And I mean, when we first started hearing about this, it was we knew about the school shootings really started with things like what happened. You know, they were like things like Kent State and Texas and things like that back in the day, University of Texas. Then they evolved into things like Columbine, and actually started really with Jonesboro in 1994. But this new development with the parents of this boy have become interesting. So who wants to kick us off?
It's interesting you say the parents. Maybe, and I'm hopeful, but maybe that starts to point the finger at the responsibility for the people who are contributing to the problem. Not to go down the Kyle Rittenhouse rabbit hole, but that was a situation where somebody gave their 17-year-old son an AR-15, drove him across state lines, and took him to the scene of problems.
No. Well, let's put that right to bed right now. The gun was in Wisconsin. The gun was purchased for him in Wisconsin. It did not cross state lines. We're going to stop that right there.
Okay, thank you for that magnificently enlightening detail. A AR-15 was bought for a 17-year-old. Stop. End of story. The parents should be shot. Now, with that said, we go to the Michigan situation, and there were plenty of warning signs. The school knew about what was wrong.
2 weeks before.
The school had been warned, the local authorities had been warned, and the parents clearly enabled. So for the first time, someone other than the person who picked up the weapon and did something horrible are being blamed. We finally started recognizing in society that it's not simply the shooter that's the problem. It's not none of these things are one issue things. It's not about gun control. It's not about just mental health. It's not just about whether or not they're of age. It's not just about whether or not the parents have enabled. There are a whole bunch of pieces to this. And because of that, there's a whole bunch of people to point the finger at. It's great that they actually arrested the parents. They should lock them up and throw away the key. That's my own opinion. But that's just where it starts. When are we going to start blaming the police who knew about it, who knew about this person's unstable behavior and did nothing? When are we going to start blaming the school administration who knew about the unstable behavior and did nothing? The fellow students who were screaming loudly about it, that give them credit because at least they were trying to make warnings about it. That's my piece right there. But I think that, as horrible as what happened in Oxford is, maybe we've finally taken that step beyond the shooter to the surrounding causes, and now we're moving in the right direction. It'll only take 400,000 or more of these incidents before we finally start doing other things, and 2 million people dying and all that before they actually put the traffic light up, if you know the reference. But we've taken that step. So there we go. We're moving.
I do want to put something into perspective before everybody starts putting out their opinions about the parents' arrest. Okay, let me put this into a different it's a similar perspective, but it's a different perspective. Okay, if a parent allows a child to throw a party at their house, let's say, and allow alcohol to be served, the parents have responsibility in that case. Whether the parents bought the gun for the kid or allowed him access to it, if they allowed him access to it, it is a very similar situation that, yes, they can be brought up on charges. Like it's similar to, if you give your kid the key to your gun cabinet, say, do what you want. Yeah, you have responsibility there. Just like you give a kid a key to a liquor cabinet, say, hey, have at it. There is precedence for this, and there should be. And we all have heard stories where, I know up by Doug, there was a girl who killed 2 kids drunk driving at 15 or 16 years old. She shouldn't have even been driving in the first place. She's ruined multiple lives, and the father was held responsible for it. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying, yes, this parents, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying there is some precedence for this, and there should be.
When I talk about we're taking a step in the right direction, I'm not specifically saying, oh, we found the parents and the parents are always responsible for school shootings, because they're not. I'm simply saying that there's, in every one of these cases, there are a number of people who are part of the scenery who have seen behaviors previously. I'm sure this is a gross overstatement, but in every one of these cases, there's a long history of unstable behavior. It seems like it. That's the way the media reports it, at least, where there are so many warning signs. And certainly the parents do enable a lot of the behavior. And we hear that after the fact too. But the school administration is enabling the behavior. The police are not doing their job. And in some ways enabling the behavior by not taking action. I'm hopeful that this is a huge step toward other people being brought into the responsibility chain when stuff like this happens. And I pray every day that our children aren't the victims of the many instances that will happen in the future until we finally figure all this out.
Well, and I'm just going to go back to what Jason was saying about the driving. I remember going to an asset protection class, and it was an attorney. And when he was younger, he'd gotten a DUI and had crashed, and his parents were held liable. So that's one of the points he was making to us is he's like, you have to be careful how your assets are titled, because if somebody else does something, if you let somebody borrow your car, or even if your car is just involved in something, you can be brought into a suit as well, and have your assets, kind of placed at risk. So I think there's, as Jason was saying, there's a precedent for that, but it's just so hard. I think and I still haven't figured out where I land on this issue, because I'm really a big believer in each person is responsible for their own behavior. But at the same time, if you have a minor, the parents, I think, do have some culpability for their actions, especially as Keith was saying, there's some activities that bring them to question what's going on with their child. But I think we have to be careful. I do I do think that there's a lot of situations, and this is why I'm so torn, because you have some judges now that like release people very quickly or don't even hold them in jail awaiting trial, and they're released and they go commit crimes. They go harm somebody, they steal something. So where does their culpability lie? I mean, would it make sense for them to be held responsible? I don't know. But sometimes I feel like, well, if that guy wouldn't have done that, or that woman would not have done that, would not have released this person back into the community, we would have had we would not have had this happen, right? And it's the same thing, I think, with the parents. But on the other hand, we all are, for adults especially, they are the people committing the crimes, if you will. And it's just very, very difficult for me to put this. I think about the situation where you have a single mother, and so they're at half the parenting power, and their kid does something, but she's out working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet, and it's hard for me to say, yeah, that mother's responsible for what her kid does, and then the dad might be out of it. He might be living in another
Right.
state or whatever, or could be the other way around as well. I think holding parents liable, responsible for their children, I think in a single parent situation could become very dangerous, and one of the things I think is that, there are a lot of, we already have an overpopulation, over representation of the Black community in prisons. And I think this would just cause more of that, and then be kind of a, and when it would happen, on the numbers, it would become a racist thing to do. Holding the parents responsible because the minority parents would be overrepresented.
You got a point there.
Just because a minor commits an act doesn't always mean that the parents are A, responsible, or B, aware. In the case of Oxford, they were arrested because they were blatantly aware of what was going on. There was a long history. Everything is a case-by-case basis. You're not going to always throw the parents under the bus, or the judge, or the student administrator, or the school administration, or the police. In each case, there are different people who are aware, and you have to do the investigation to figure out which people should take responsibility and which shouldn't. But as a society, I think it will make us all stand up and pay a lot more attention, because we all become at risk when somebody behaves in an unstable manner. Now, the rabbit hole you're worried about, and I agree, Chad, is as citizens, we're all responsible to make sure people behave, but we all have different measures of that. You guys all, I'm speaking specifically of Chad and Doug, are more in favor of Second Amendment rights and gun possession and things like that. And I happen to be somebody who, for my personal self, I've never touched a gun in my life. But I don't necessarily imprint that belief on everyone else. I simply don't want to have anything to do with them myself. But there are people like me who are much more radical. And if you own a gun, you must be responsible for life. So, Chad, you own a gun in Atlanta, maybe. So that school shooting in Fresno, California, that's going to happen next year. Watch that prediction. God help me. Is your fault because you own a gun, and because they're so radical. And people on both ends of the radical scale can start pointing fingers, overly pointing them. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole and blame people when they're not responsible. But it can ruin, the moment you blame anybody for anything in society, they're ruined, and you can't take it back, even if they're innocent. So it's a very dangerous thing. You're absolutely right. I think that's the only reason the parents in Oxford were arrested, because it was so screamingly obvious what they had done. Hopefully, I hope in those cases it happens more and more. The Boston bomber, if I remember correctly, I don't remember much of the background story, but I'm pretty sure the parents, or he had family members that were very much aware of what was going on, and they were never real. I think a brother was brought to justice, but that was it.
The brother died. His brother died.
Wasn't he the one who was shot in the house when they went hunting him or
Brother
something?
was killed. Yeah,
Well,
they did it together. The brother was killed.
that's certainly a way of bringing him to justice. I like that. I have no problem with that at all. Sounds a little crude, I know, but that's my personal belief again. Uh, yeah, their history is littered with these incidents, and we know that people were aware of it, parents were aware of it, and people screamed at it, but nothing ever happened. Now something's happening.
I don't remember his parents being much involved in
I
that.
don't know if it was, I don't know if it was parents, it was other family members. I don't remember.
I think there was a wife of the older brother.
I know the
I think
sister
she
had
had
become
knowledge of it.
both.
I think it was her.
Here's the problem with what we're trying to do here. We're trying to remember not a shooting, but a bombing, but one of these cases. But there have been 765,000 of them since then. So how can we possibly remember the details of each of these different cases?
We'll put a better example of Sandy Hook. There was belief that he was looking for the mother. Trying to, part of it was he was trying to take his mother out. So
I thought he did.
No, he didn't kill her.
Okay.
He absolutely did not kill her. But he was trying to, but no, he didn't.
But that doesn't make the mother responsible. It makes,
no, I'm saying
she's raising a troubled kid for sure. But there were guns in the house. I mean, good Lord, we're again. I think that the example of Oxford will go down in history as an opportunity to finally bring into the focus the community members around unstable people and make people more aware of those around them.
Yes.
And I think the other thing too is whenever you're dealing with teenagers and adolescents, and I remember I used to work on a suicide hotline, and whenever we had an adult call in, we had a protocol, right? And it's like, because they're, for the most part, you can predict there's a predictability to adults. But as soon as you had an adolescent call in who said they wanted to hurt themselves or hurt others, the protocol was to get somebody to them, because they're so emotional and they're illogical. They don't think ahead. So, I mean, I think that aspect can be sprinkled on this situation as well. It's just that adolescents, maybe they're certifiably have a certifiable mental illness, but maybe they're just upset about something and they're emotional and they want to go after something. And I mean, they're adults obviously like that as well, but it's much more common in adolescents that they do that. So I think it's harder to predict what they'll do. But of course, if somebody has a history, if a child has a history of this kind of stuff, or mental illness or threats against others and those kinds of things, then you treat that much differently than you would a kind of a normal kid.
Yeah, I was just going to say that everybody has these great points and want to jump in almost in everything that somebody's saying. And this subject, just the whole case in itself is just so much to unpack and so many different ways to go. And the media is going to really be the driver of this, sadly. And the problem is that media isn't the investigation arm that they used to be. So what they're going to share with us is what they share with us. And we all get to make our own, lead our own stories on how we think, and just a little bit of looking into this. I mean, and like you were saying, the laws, a lot of this has to deal with laws and what can you charge somebody with and can't, and they change from state to state. And I was just thinking about what happened also in Texas, and now you have another shooting and a kid with a gun, and it's a .45 Magnum. Got to get it from somewhere. So now, are we supposed to also investigate where he got this .45 that he just mowed down, 4 people with? I mean, but I know we're talking about the parents for this argument right now. But well, not an argument, discussion. But I mean, I just think that some of the stuff, I mean, really what bothered me is more about looking at a couple of the different things that have hit society, and the guy who mowed down the people with his car, and all, and just how race is taken to such a level of one of the worst things that could be thrown on somebody right now. I think also people who just don't care for life in period should be also held to a level that where they think that human life is just like they don't really care about what they're doing, except that they're just going out and killing people senselessly. Also should be held to a level of hate, a different or a new level. But yeah, that's more or less what bothered me is just the lack of people's just sense of life at all, and that they could just go out and just kill people randomly is just ridiculous and something that definitely needs to be looked into.
We all have our, I know we all have our own varying beliefs on gun control. Mine actually probably fall closer to Chad's. I think that would surprise Keith. Because I know for me, without getting into too much detail, they were always around my house. I and the funny thing is, for as much as that, I've never shot a gun in my life. But they were there. I'll never deny they were there, because there's no reason to deny they were there. Why am I openly discussing this? Because my father is a rationally thinking person when it comes to guns and things like that. My father used them. They were hunting rifles, and he used them for what they were meant to be used for, hunting. The only time my father ever really used any kind of handgun, if he had one, was when he was working in Brooklyn, when he was robbed 3 or 4 times. You kind of have a reason to have a carrying permit when you're robbed as often as people are in New York. Sorry, you do. But I mean, I'm not going to get into my beliefs on gun control, but yeah, it's always a very difficult subject. But like I said, I mean, the parents here, their decisions should be called into question. They should be brought up and questioned about it. And then you decide whether you should charge them or not, or if they are guilty of any kind of crime. That's a different story. But yeah, you can it's going to be a very long and drawn out process to figure this all out. And I'm not 100% sure we'll ever be able to get this all figured out. Because
and then go ahead. Sorry.
Unfortunately, well, fortunately and unfortunately, kid is alive, but he's not in the mental state to be able to answer the questions you need him to answer. And he probably never will be, because he's mentally unstable as it is, and probably will be for the rest of his life. He probably has been his entire life. But it's very difficult in these situations when the culprit survives. Everybody thinks, oh, good, we can question them. You can, but in some cases, they're absolutely no help, because they're just gone,
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the other issues with this kid's parents is that they heard that there were charges that were going to be brought, and then they ran.
Well, they did that.
And so I know that there's. What's that?
I said they did that incorrectly. Charging.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Announcing it.
Yeah, that definitely could come up later on to be a problem for this. Well, the people bringing the case against them.
Yeah, it could, and it really does. It seems like in this case there were so many errors made on the behalf of the school, the counselors, the parents, the prosecution. everybody just made all kinds of errors, and it's horrible. But um, I think that was the other part is that the parents were running, so that makes them appear to me to look guilty. Why are they running if they didn't do anything, right? If they don't have anything to be afraid of. So,
Mhm.
but then part of it, the media's like, well, they were 1 mile from the border, but isn't Detroit on the border with Canada? I mean, so yeah, but I mean, they ran. It's obvious they ran, but
Is
I
Oxford
don't
near
know.
Detroit? I don't know.
Yeah, because I thought it was, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the other thing I think of is we've got kind of the kids that are unstable, and they take a gun to school and they blast some people, right? They kill some people. And then I think you've got some kids that are picked on, and they're really approaching it in an adolescent way, kind of, I don't want to say this rashly, put that in quotes, because they've got this pain that somebody's delivering to them that can't be stopped. And that was my understanding of the Arkansas, one of the very first shootings, was that was more of a going after bullies. And then I think we had in Columbine, I think they were up to sort of they wanted fame or something. I don't know. I mean, it seemed like they had a plan, and
Well,
they were not doing that I don't know. They're doing it for some craziness.
Klebold, Dylan Klebold, Dylan Klebold was a leader. That's the thing. Dylan Klebold was a very smart kid and actually pretty well put together mentally. It was almost like with him, he was trying to become like a zealot. As where the young man in Jonesboro, the young man in Jonesboro, though, has had many issues. After being released from prison, he's become a career criminal. So it's not as open and shut as they were going after bullies. He's been in jail again in recent years, at least once. So it's not quite just going after bullies. There's a lot more to it. He is definitely a criminal record besides from that.
And I would agree, but who would touch him with a 10-foot pole for employment? I mean, I think some of that stuff, and I don't know that much about the case, but I can say that from what I have seen, the lives of people who have committed felonies or who have been charged with felonies and have served time, they don't have that many options afterwards about what they can do. And so, I mean, I don't know how that plays into that, or if it plays. I'm sure it does play into it, but I don't know. It just like you all know that the one friend who highly educated, smart guy, and again, from my perspective, he was wrongly accused and committed. He cannot get a job for anything. The guy is brilliant. He's got awards and accolades for things he's done independently before all the stuff happened for him. And he still has got no luck. So I couldn't imagine if he can't do it, if he can't persevere in this situation, how is some guy that doesn't even have a college or doesn't even have a high school diploma?
So when it comes to school bullies, if we're going to go down that conversation piece, it isn't, somebody got bullied and they decided to take out a gun and shoot somebody, and they only did one thing. It was only that they got bullied. I was bullied every day of my life, from kindergarten to the end of 12th grade. The people who take guns out and shoot people, I have all the sympathy in the world for, because I've been there. But they're the ones whose mental constitutions broke. Their mental health was shattered. They probably did not have the support systems and the people around them to keep them afloat through all the agony of being bullied. And when you don't and you crack, then you become a unstable person with a lot of other problems. So the person you were referring to, when you pick up a gun and shoot people, there's other things at play. That's what caused you to go down that path. But then you cracked and became a sick and unstable person by choosing violence as a response. I could have done that. I had every fucking reason in the world to do that for 13 years, for the shit that I had to endure. But I didn't. I was raised a different way. I had very involved parents. I had very involved school administrations. I didn't have any friends. I mean, I remember before high school, I had like one friend a year, and it was never the same person. It was rough, but I was able to stay stable because I had people around me to help me understand that I was better than all of what was happening to me, and people who were periodically intervening to punish the people who were behaving that way. The ones that crack and pick up a gun and just fucking shoot everybody, they don't have that. But they become people who are dangerous. So I understand why it's very much that they're not going to be able to do a whole lot afterwards because they've committed horrendous crimes. Yes, they were encouraged to do so, but they still committed horrendous crimes. And how do you ever employ somebody who's picked up a AR-15 and shot a lot of people? Look at Arizona State University, supposedly, I think it's ASU, who supposedly the aforementioned Mr. Rittenhouse is applied to or is going to apply to be a student there. There's a whole
online
about that. And they're like, he hasn't applied here. And I guarantee you, if he does apply, they're not going to take him. Yeah, I wonder why. Whether he's guilty or not, and I happen to think he's scum of the earth, but that's besides the point. Whether he is or not, he's screwed for life. Because everyone will always recognize him. Everyone will always know who he is. Unless he goes and gets plastic surgery and changes his name and moves to a different country, he'll never get anywhere doing anything in this country ever again.
He's definitely a hot potato.
Oh, yeah.
The interesting thing is the article that I was reading about this when we were talking about Crumpton actually compares him to Simpkins, who happened last month. All right. Right. So him versus Simpkins in Texas. And they said the difference here is just, the randomness and instability of somebody shooting someone versus someone who was bullied. Now, the guy in Texas, Simpkins, his thing is also what more or less, adding to what Chad was saying and all about being bullied, there was also collateral damage. I mean, he also wound up hitting a pregnant woman and a teacher, So, I mean, he might have gone after his attackers, let's call them, but he also, hit collateral damage in also getting his restitution, let's say, for all the bullying. So, I mean, there's also that too, that we're not always talking about just getting back at your bully,
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like the people who shoot people are notoriously bad shots.
I can tell you from experience, and listen, I'm not a young man. In fact, I'm the oldest guy in this room here. But I remember all of it. And I remember being, I can specifically point to a guy named Eric Hove and a guy named Andy Todd and a guy named Greg Acquaviva, who over the years were the three biggest offenders of bullying in my life. But the anger I felt as a student toward a whole bunch of other people who were in their sphere. So if I had cracked, if I had access to weapons and I had cracked and my mental constitution had dissolved on me and I wanted to go shoot people, it would have been far more than those three people who would have been in my sights. Because there were so many people who were their friends or hung out in circles, and so many people who I considered, let me rephrase that, so many people who watched the abuse and the bullying but didn't do anything. From my perspective, they were accomplices. So yeah, there's collateral damage and sometimes you shoot the pregnant teacher. But there's going to be a wide array of people who are going to be in the sites when you're that badly abused and hurt. You've got your eyes on a lot more than just the people who are actually physically interacting with you.
Right.
And so this ties all the way back to us and the way we raise our kids. And I feel very comfortable in saying that none of our kids are going to pick up guns and go down to the school and shoot anybody, because they've been raised in a way that they know that there are alternatives, and they know there are places to go to ask and to get support if they go through this kind of shit, or if they go through any kind of shit. There's places where they can go and people they can talk to. They've got very involved parents. Even in my own family, as much as my ex-wife and I don't see eye to eye and get along, Justin and Jeremy know that they can go to either one of us throughout their whole upbringings. As much as they may not have liked the behavior of their mother, maybe sometimes of their father, who knows? They always knew they could come to us and talk about these things, and we would grant them protection, and we would intervene if we needed to. They always knew that, and I think all of your kids are the same way. Not that this is one of the many things that's going on in society. There are too many kids who are not raised properly. And Chad, you made an interesting point. The mother who has no father in the picture and is working 2 or 3 jobs and is hardly ever there. She's certainly not at fault, but society is for not supporting her better. Not the guy who disappeared. Yeah, he certainly should take more responsibility and provide her with compensation so that she doesn't have to slave all the time. But we've got so many things, as Doug says, to unpack here, because society does a very, very poor job of paying attention to those who are really hurting, those who are destitute, those who are below the poverty line. And yeah, there's how many people are out there that are working 2, 3, 4 menial jobs at minimum wage, which is not yet $15 an hour across the country. And even if it was, is it enough to not have to work 2, 3, 4 jobs to survive in our rapidly escalating inflation society? Don't know. There's just so many. This is such an example of every issue has a whole bunch of different pieces. We could talk about police defunding, but there's 80,000 pieces to that. It's not just, stop hiring the police. That's nobody wants that, except very radical people. For the most part, people there's a lot of different things that go into the equation of why the police have challenges in their jobs. There's a lot of things that go into the pro-life, pro-choice. There's not just one thing or one or two topics. Each one of these topics has an array of things that society has to work on in order to solve the one problem. I got to get off my horse here.
Well, I agree with you, Keith. And I think another thing that really is missing in this situation is that there's a real shortage of adolescent mental health. It is very hard. This probably 4 or 5 years ago, a friend was having problems with her daughter, and I was trying to help her find some mental health assistance, and it's just not available. People have a full panel. They can't take any more patients, or they're just not available. It's just, amazing to me. Like if somebody does say, hey, my kid has an issue, I need him or her to talk to somebody. It's hard to find that somebody. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I want to bring up is, I think I'm not sure where I stand on this as well, but I think our kids growing up had it better than we did in terms of bullying, because it seems like there's been this whole programs about anti-bullying campaigns and those kinds of things that have come out. I mean, I know it still happens, but it doesn't happen as much as when we were growing up. I don't know. And I think for me, and I think this was maybe a different experience than you had, Keith, was, I was bullied quite a bit too, especially when I got to high school. But one of the rites of passage for me, or something that really kind of boosted me, was standing up to the bully and overcoming that, and I don't think, and for me, I think that those things shape who people are, right? And I feel like I came out on the better end of that, because I finally got the cojones to stand up and to confront this guy. and was successful, and I didn't have any problems. And so that taught me some lessons about life as well. So I think we're living in a different epoch now. For our kids are living in a different epoch than we were growing up. And I think it could have been much more brutal in terms of the bullying that goes on for our age groups, kind of the older guys, if you will, versus our children. I feel like our children now, even my daughter now, like she was getting having some issues with some girl at school the other day. I don't know that I'd say it was bullying. And for me, she's had that kind of she's been in tough situations before, and she can handle herself, but I don't necessarily want her handling herself, because she'll take care of the problem, and I want her to involve the teachers to take care of the problems. So she has done that, because she'll put them in their place right away, verbally and physically. But I don't want that. I'm trying to teach her, that that's not the right way to do it. But that was existence. That's how you have that's survival in South America for her. But so anyway, it's a different time for our kids now, I think. And I do think that, obviously we're involved in this Dads on Life stuff, and we take pride in what we do with our kids. So I do think that they've had a different experience bringing as well. But I think society to that point has shifted a little bit as well.
Right.
I think our experiences are similar. Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was someone who was bullied and attacked and, beat up. And as Chad was saying, until you get back at them. And, I was like one of the first people not the first people, one of the first people that ignored it, being my brother being attacked, until finally one day I just took care of that bully, and we never had issues with him again, for my little brother, who's now the big brother. But I think that what you're saying is true, Chad, but and a lot of things have changed. But I think also the one thing that you didn't touch upon is that it's changed the bullying to more cyberbullying, which, in my opinion, coming from the idea of, your neighbors pick on you, they call you bucktooth, they make fun of you for being homeschooled, they make fun of you, for any amount of reasons, for being unathletic, whatever. And now it's gone to like more of a cyber thing, which I was like, oh, come on, really? Somebody said something bad about you online. But I guess it's real. And we've come across the case, within our own household, and hearing other kids that my friends hang out with, and how bad it is for their daughter, and how that went through, like, online, and it like went through the whole school. And now this girl is just like, her situation is terrible, her life, and how maybe it's changed from more of a physical thing to maybe more of an online thing that, just ruin your life.
Absolutely.
Hey, Chad, your experience reminded me that, and I try to forget, but I can't. We're actually more similar than you think. I remember very distinctly in 10th grade, one of the aforementioned names that I won't repeat again, and he objected to the fact that when I stood for the Pledge of Allegiance, I didn't say it out loud. I chose to not speak. I simply respected the flag, and I stood and I put my hand on my heart. I didn't say anything, and that was offensive to him. He was very conservative in his viewpoints, and we wound up. I don't remember exactly how it started, but we went through. How the wall. Sometimes you could remove a wall, the sliding walls between classrooms.
Right.
We had that.
Yep.
We actually fought so much right in front of a very small, very attractive young woman teacher who couldn't do anything about it. But we went through the wall, through it, into the next classroom, literally took out the wall, knocked it out. And there was a much larger male teacher there who was able to break it up. That definitely changed the tenor of that relationship too. We didn't become friends or anything, but there was never a physical confrontation after that.
Right.
So it with that person, I had other confrontations with other people, but sometimes I don't want my kids to have to fight just to be in a classroom safely and not be under the threat of being attacked by their classmates. I think it does happen a lot less, which is why when it happens, it's in the news. It's big. In New Jersey, where I live, there was a huge, Jason, I'm sure heard all about this, and I think it was Middletown, New Jersey. where there was someone either a football player was attacked by several other football players and sexually abused, and it was broomsticks and shit, and they did some horrible things to this kid. I forget what school it was, but the championship game they were in was canceled. The whole coaching staff is on unpaid leave while they're being investigated. I'm sure they're all going to be fired because they all knew about it. They all saw it and they didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to lose their championship game. Of course, the parents are all angry that why are you punishing the rest of the school? Why can't we play the game anyway? Okay, I quit. Seriously, I mean, is that really what's important here? But that was national news. When we were kids, that happened all the time and no one ever said anything. So the environment has certainly changed so that when horrible things like that happen, they're highlighted a lot in the media. So we're moving in the right direction, I suppose.
Yep. I agree, but just to the point of what we're talking about here, and I was pretty pissed, but it was all hands, right? When I would be bullied, I never thought about taking a gun. And I think, there's just that line that was crossed back in the 90s, I think too, and kind of opened that door, if you will, for people to start thinking that way. It was just never a thought. I mean, not that people did, but people, the people in my school growing up, we're very gun friendly. It's a rural community. It's a farming community for the most part. And it wouldn't be anything for, I mean, I could, it doesn't happen, but I could see a student coming to school with a gun rack in their pickup and the guns on it. But I wouldn't be worried about it. Maybe now I would, but at that time I would not have been.
There
Somebody's going to pick up a gun and shoot it. It's just that line has been crossed now, I think, and people view it as an option, if you will.
Yeah, there was one of the original first school shootings. You kind of go down that road of it being in a farming community. Was one of the first school shootings was in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, the Native American school. So yeah, it definitely, that damn sure could possibly happen. I mean, I think there was one or two maybe early on that were very similar, and it was a very similar community. I know, like, they happen so often that we don't know a lot about some of these places. I know Jonesboro wasn't exactly the biggest community. It was a small suburban, somewhat rural community at the time. Jonesboro's built up a little bit here and there, but yeah, and it's only a matter of time before, probably something similar to that happens.
Like every week it happens.
No, I mean, happening in certain communities, like Chad's point of it happening on one of the farm boys, with gun rack.
Excuse me. We have a school shooting every week, literally every week. Some of them aren't publicized as much because we're so used to it that they don't even bother putting them in the news anymore. But the numbers are astonishing. We've had more school shootings in this country this year than we've had weeks in the year, by far. And by the way, it doesn't happen in other countries, but we're about to go down another path, so we're not going to talk about that.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. There was one in Russia, there was one in Germany, and they were bigger incidents than they've been in the United States. They end up being
emphasis on one.
They end up being large scale incidents, and we don't hear about them here because they're in another country, because it's not in my backyard.
Look at your statistics. Gun violence is almost unheard of in most other countries.
Some of the bigger incidents have been in Russia, China, Germany. They happen overseas, Taiwan.
Yes, they
happen
have their
much
exceptions to
larger
the rule.
scale.
They have their one-offs. Yes, they do.
I believe that every country, it may not be school shootings, but every country has their issue. And
No
I
one's
know
immune to
somebody
it.
from Colombia was commenting on the school shootings, going, "Oh, you Americans, you just have a school shooting all the time." And I go, "Well, you Colombians have had a internal civil war going on that has killed hundreds of thousands of people, have displaced 80,000 people." And I just pulled up some statistics on that, and I said, "So that doesn't even compare to what we have here. They're both horrible. Yours is far worse than ours, though. So don't sit there and point the finger. Everybody's got their problems. You just got to look for them. And it's not the same problem, but there are problems."
I mean, there are people who say that, like the shooting in the nightclub in Miami, in Orlando, say that oh, it only happens that shit only happens here. No, they don't. People because what, maybe a year and a half, 2 years before that, there was the shooting in France at a concert.
Yeah, with the
At a concert hall in France. I mean, they everybody points the fingers at the U.S., pointing them in the wrong place, because it definitely is happening. Or like you said, like you brought up the guy who ran the people down last week. Oh, that don't happen. Nope, it doesn't. That only happened in America.
happened in Nice, France. I remember that.
It happened in England. It
That
happened in France
Germany.
in the last couple of years. So
Yep.
yeah, these incidents happen all over the place. It's just, but we turn a blind eye to them in other countries because they're not here.
Yeah, I definitely think that the news media, and I would say in Colombia, I'm more likely to hear about something major from the United States than I am to hear about something major in Colombia while I'm here.
Mhm.
So there's some censoring of what's reported internationally. But back to the topic is, do we think that holding parents responsible for what their kids do? I mean, ultimately, I think we are. In many cases, we're responsible for our children. But do we think that holding the parents would impact that behavior? Like, I'm wondering if the parents of this kid that in Michigan, if those parents knew that they could be charged with something, would they have done the same things that they did in the previous month with their son? I don't know.
I'm hoping that makes
Is it-
every parent in this country pay a little bit closer attention to their kids, and not just parents, school administration officials, police, close friends. Absolutely. I think everyone takes a role, and this could be the turning point that makes people start paying attention around them a lot more.
But when I think about, for me personally, it like, I wouldn't even care about the laws necessarily. I just don't want my kid going and doing something like that. And I don't, he wouldn't, I'm very confident of that, but like, I don't know. It's just like, I'm like driven more internally than by the laws to I don't want to say it like this, but manage my child to try to keep him between the lines. But at this point, he's an adult; he can do what he wants. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to do something crazy, but he makes good decisions. But for me, I don't know that the laws and going after them would. I don't know if that makes a difference. That would not make a difference to me.
No, because you're a good parent. You're already
I would
doing
behave the
things
same.
you're supposed to do. What I wanted to do is make a difference to the parents who are not paying attention, and maybe, oh my God, my kid is kind of nuts, but I'm just, what am I going to do about it? Well, maybe you ought to figure that out. Maybe you ought to start doing that thing called parenting.
Yep.
Doug liked that line. That was good. Yeah,
Anybody have anything they want to add before we start to wrap this up for the week?
No, I think it's 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 a horrible situation they had up in Michigan, and it's interesting. We talk about bringing other people in and if being culpable for the responsibilities of for the actions of others. And I mean, there's just so much of that, and it'll be on one hand, I kind of like the idea because I think that people would think twice before they do, they'd think twice before releasing somebody on parole if they have any questions at all, things like that. Or I mean, there's just so many examples out there, I think, in the world that we could use. But um, would it work? And I'm still trying to figure. I'm still not clear where I stand on. I mean, I'm still processing information about is it a good idea or not. I think that certain people need to be held responsible, but does it make a difference? I don't know.
time will certainly tell on that, but I have no qualms about saying that I think this is a very important step forward, and I fully support taking the parents into custody and charging them. And I hope very much it is a step toward other things. I'm certainly very proud of our kids and how they've developed, and I think that the four of us should be commended for being good parents. But I think we're in the minority. I really do. I think that parenting is becoming less and less a skill nowadays. And I think that for all the qualms that we may have had with our parents, the things that may or not have always gone the way we wanted them when we were raised, parenting was a bit more consistent when we were kids, all of us. It was not consistent at all, and there's too many people who are not paying attention to their kids and allowing stuff to happen. But I don't want to point the finger just at the parents. It takes a village. In New York, in the New York area, we have an expression that has somewhat gone globally viral, and that is, if you see something, say something. It is an expression that originated in New York City after 9/11.
Right.
It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. People should be paying attention to behaviors. It's not that difficult to figure out when someone's starting to behave in a way that could be dangerous to other people. And too many people sit at the side and he's crazy, but not my family, so I'm just going to let it go.
Not in my backyard, pretty much.
Not in my backyard, not in my family.
Yeah.
He's not my brother. It's not my responsibility.
Not my problem.
And that's wrong. We are a community. We are a planet of people that is a family. And you don't have to be blood related to stand up and say, that's dangerous. I'm worried that person could hurt other people. Too few people are willing to do that. Our kids are willing to do that. Our kids would stand up and say something. All of our kids would stand up and say, that kid's behaving very irrationally, and I'm worried that he might hurt somebody. All of our kids would do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we're all aware that earlier this week was the 41st anniversary of, you want to call it an assassination, you just want to call it a murder, whatever you want to call it, of John Lennon. And I'm sure we all, I mean, if you haven't, I'd like to know what rock you've been living under. I'm sure we've all heard the song Imagine, read the lyrics. We all know what the song is about. I often wonder what people like John Lennon, what people like Martin Luther King, what people like Gandhi would think if they were alive now. I'm not for sure they would be particularly happy with the developments of the last in the years since they've been gone. Unfortunately, as I've said before, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we clearly are, history is doomed to repeat itself unless change is made. We've tried to make change in the times since Columbine and Jonesboro and other things. But it seems like no matter what we do, people find a way. Unfortunately, I think that this is a topic that we're probably going to, every couple of weeks, every couple of months, continue to bring up, continue to talk about, continue to pontificate about at times. But the only thing we can do personally as parents, especially for our own children, is continue what we've been doing. Because as Keith said, I think as parents, I think we're all doing a pretty good job. But clearly we're learning what everybody else is doing that we may really have to worry about. So from all of us here at Dads on Life, take care, everybody.
Have a great week.
Take care, guys.
Have a great Sunday. Talk to you soon.